Texas Tech has a large NIL budget and a couple guys that might get shots to the NBA, but Houston has a king. Kingston Flemings leads the way in a big comeback for the Cougs over the Red Raiders.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater game stop by, I'm tripping over my words because I'm so excited to talk with you about Houston winning that basketball game. Thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the post game the next morning, anywhere in between, and making Locked On Cougs the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast out there, making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Yes, Houston wins. I got the thing wrong in my background. I'm going to try and update that as we go here. Houston wins 69-65 over Texas Tech. And look, with about 3 minutes left, I was preparing for a very, very different feeling kind of post-game. Just didn't feel like Houston quite had it there. They ultimately did because they got a kid named Kingston Flemings. We'll talk about him a lot in this first segment. I want to talk about, honestly, the game of runs and kind of other things that went right and wrong in the second. And then, as always, we'll talk about some nightcaps in that final bit there. Man, oh man, though. Kingston freaking Flemings. Now, inside baseball here, I guess they call it inside baseball, but we're talking basketball. Kingston was very much down to Texas Tech and Houston when he was in his recruiting process and chose Houston for a lot of reasons that you and I think would all make very obvious. But Sampson being a large one of them. Now, McCasland's a great coach. Sampson is a one-of-one kind of guy. And what's fascinating here is I would have almost felt like in those first few minutes that you felt like you saw that play out. Kingston missed his first several shots because 5 or 7 shots. He might have been 1 of 7 or something to open the game. It was not a great showing. And then suddenly he just turned it on and he made a couple middies. He showed off the speed and attacking the rim and had some good moments in the late first half, early second half, and then took a substitution rotation, things that right, whatever. And then he came back in and he was kind of doing his thing, whatever. And in that final 3-minute stretch, he makes a play on defense to get the ball back. Just over 2 minutes to play, he is dribbling up to set up the offense, and his man is sagged back to cover the high post, and he just dribbles up into a 3 and knocks it down to give Houston a 1-point lead. He then plays tremendous defense, covers the corner 3. The long rebound goes over the rim. Milos Uzan is fouling, trying to go for the ball there on the backside. And Lawan Watts, who we'll actually get to talk about in a second, gets to go to the foul line. He makes 1 of 2. So it's tied up. And it's okay. Under 2 minutes, tied up. That's every basketball game in America. Fantastic. They come back down. Kingston Flemings then in the same high post action, dribbles away from that, pulls up for like a 16-footer just outside the elbow. Nails, right? Just beautiful nails. Houston up 2. They come down. Texas Tech, piddles around and whatnot. Now make sure I get the exact sequence here, right? Because I think that it only had that 1 possession after that before the next Kingston Fleming shot. But they come back down. JT Toppin. JT Toppin does miss a shot, right? Houston gets the rebound, comes on down. Milos attacks, gets the 1-and-1, but misses it. Houston gets the rebound. Cenac gets the rebound, gets to go to the free throw line. He makes the second one. JT Toppin makes a layup. So Houston's up 1 point at this point after the JT Toppin layup. That was the Lawan Watts assist. Like it was a lob that wasn't a dunk, but was a lob, right? Then Houston up 1. Kingston with the ball spends a lot of the shot clock. As he whittles it down, he gives it to Chris, and you can see him wave back. He's like, "Get me the ball back." And Chris, okay, passing the ball back. Kingston, side-to-side dribble, 3-pointer, nails. And it's 66-62 with 30 seconds left. And it's a 4-point game. And like that was all she wrote. Texas Tech came down, misses a 3-pointer. Foul game starts. Kingston Flemings actually gets to go to the free throw line and add to the point total there. He finished with, I believe, 23. But what an impressive, like the way he just flipped the switch. And look, other guys, I'm talking with Locked on College Basketball's Isaac Shade later. Other guys will take Darius Acuff. They'll take other positions. You see those kinds of moments. And look, I get there were freshman defensive mistakes made by Kingston included earlier in this game. You can't teach, you can't coach. I'm not necessarily sure Kingston could describe for you himself what happened. And I just, it's just unreal. Seeing it happen, play out. And look, I should point out, like, I'm a big fan of Kingston as a person. He's a fantastic kid. He like says almost like what sound like cliche things and like truly wholeheartedly believes in this very wholesome way. He's a great kid, great person, great family, all of that, right? And then when you put him on the basketball court, he's a bleeping killer. Like he's truthfully, like when it's time to win that game at the end, he's like, fine, I'll do it. And it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And look, Houston could have lost that game. And frankly, Sampson will say something to the effect in the post game about how, like, had they missed those shots, they'd have the same lessons to learn as if they made them from the first 38 minutes. They just now get to learn them after a win. And really, that means they still have a lot of room to improve. And that's all true. But what you can't improve, change, again, you can't teach, coach, describe what Kingston Flemings does at the end of that basketball game. Again, this is a great Texas Tech team. I know they had some early season injuries to guys we haven't seen play a whole lot, so I don't know how much they would have helped or hurt. They do have JT Toppin, last year's Big 12 Player of the Year, and they do have Christian Anderson, who looks like a first-round draft pick, and Houston's got Kingston. Houston's got more than Kingston. I don't mean to say that he's the only good player, but that was the difference at the end. And it is just unbelievable. Daniel Gutierrez here chimes in on the chat. Best freshman in the country is on our team. Kingston Flemings is him. All kinds of different praise. People talking about how they're choosing to enjoy the game. Cornholio, who's frequently a troll, but comes in here with some positivity. Kingston looks like a legit lottery pick. And I think the deal is at 18, to Cornholio's credit here, when he has all of those indescribable, unteachable kind of things that he just has in him, he's going to be a top 10 pick, because ultimately coaches in the NBA will see the speed, the size, the athleticism. Okay, we can work with all that. We can't teach this other thing. we can teach you jump shots, floaters, defensive rotations, coverages. We can't teach that. And just what a freaking performance. How fortunate, Houston Cougar fans, you and I, we go from Quentin Grimes, we get Marcus Sasser, we get Jamal Shed, we get LJ Cryer, was an All-American last year, Juwan Roberts down inside, and now we get this kid. Like, it's always the next one. It's always the next one with these Cougars. And like, man, what a freaking night. And again, like, it didn't start off that way. The first 10 minutes, Kingston looked like an 18-year-old playing with grown men, because he kind of is. And it just flipped the switch. When it was time to win the game, he flipped the switch and he turned it around. Look, there are other things to take away from this game, and we will absolutely talk about them. Today's show is brought to you by Rougiet, and we will talk about them later. I know some of you guys like to talk about Rougiet. You should talk about it more, but today's episode being brought to them does not mean that we're not also going to talk to you some about our buddies over at FanDuel, because college football playoffs are here. We're into the semifinals. Those Texas Tech Red Raiders are not, which is kind of its own. So some funny signs on that one. FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game of the playoffs, because right now, college football playoff game day, FanDuel users can get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what's awesome about that. You can use the profit boost on bets that you already feel good about. You've already made them feel good about. Ride the favorite when you think a team is controlling the matchup. Take a shot on the underdog. Build a parlay. Then apply that profit boost and go after even bigger wins. When you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. Visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. I want to thank you again for making Locked on Cougs your first listen to the post game, the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast out there, and making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. And if you just can't get enough Locked on Cougs, let me recommend the everyday all access subscription tier. Look, you're going to get the same amount of Locked on Cougs every day in the normal feed. This is for people who want more access to an ad-free audio feed, members only Discord server, merch stores, all access episodes, one-on-one texting. Those bonus episodes include some sort of film stuff that I maybe can't put out there in the traditional setting. We get to talk about Houston Cougars even more. So if you want to check it out, I want to check out any of the everyday all access options, go to lockedonpodcast.com/everyday, or if you want to go to Locked On Cougs right away, go to lockedoncougs.supercast.com to sign up. Now, a couple questions came from the Everyday All Access members in this one, and it was funny to see. Let's see if I can pull up the funny one here in a second. Is Lawan Watts for Tech the best player for Houston? Seriously, that poor man. That kid is a good basketball player. He had 36 points the other night, and I would point out he's a good basketball player. But Lawan Watts, I don't know what his plus minus was in this one. I don't think it's been calculated. I mean, it probably has been. It's just not on ESPN. Dude played 30 minutes, and he managed to get just 5 points, 1 of 9 from the field. He had 2 turnovers, and it felt like a lot more. He had a rough night, and Houston took advantage. What I do think, though, is interesting is because Lawan Watts is 6'6". What Houston's able to do in this one, I think, actually opens up something that I want to explore as they keep playing Big 12 competition. And that is they found a versatility in both Cenac and Tugler defensively. Now, look, offensively, Tugler is very much an inside of 4-foot kind of player, and Cenac, frankly, feels very much like an outside of 15-foot kind of player. And whatever you think about that, that's just kind of where they feel right now. But defensively, because they're both so athletic, when Tugler's not fouling, because he had a stupid foul again tonight, when Tugler's not fouling, they were able to swap, play outside with Lawan Watts, whichever one was on him. They could always have someone on the rim. And what's fascinating about that, too, was whenever one of them was involved in a double team trap, playing the line of scrimmage, whatever up top, the other one was able to defend the rim as a true help side guy. And part of this is admittedly because Tech had one true big in the game for basically all of the game. I mean, JT Toppin himself played 38 minutes. They only played 8 guys. Only one bench player for them played over 10 minutes, right? Frankly, worth pointing out, only one bench player for either team scored in this game, which is very odd. But I think that versatility we'll see continue to play out as Houston plays more 4-out, 1-in kind of teams. It'll be challenging against the BYUs with DeBonso or Arizona with Koa Pete, and they have those guys as power forwards that can do an outside stuff too. But your Baylors of the world this weekend or other teams that play 4-out, 1-in, I think Houston will be able to get back into that. And ultimately, it did lead to Lawan Watts having a rough night for Tech, but a good night for Houston, if that makes some sense. Other questions came in. Too many fresh mistakes everywhere to win. Now, I'm not going to call out which everyday or all access member that was, but this was a tremendous win. This was a great win for the program, for Houston, for Kingston. There absolutely were fresh mistakes made. And what's awesome about that was you kept a team 20 points below their season averages, kept them shooting well below their season averages basically everywhere. The three-point line at one point in this game was actually higher for them, but it actually dropped down by the end. You did all that, and you still have room for improvement. There was one moment on a backside cut from JT Toppin that help side Cenac was frozen in his boots. Did not get there. Kingston Flemings had the tremendous end that won the game early. They were running that Petty kid around screens, and every time Kingston was like a half step late, Petty rose up from three. And for what it's worth, Petty was 5 of 9 from three. That was an impactful moment there. I also thought it was worth pointing out that once there was a moment where Sharp and Cenac and Tugler were all off the floor. That was when Tech made their run. And that was really more of a defensive thing for Houston. They couldn't keep Tech from making baskets. But ultimately, they overcame all that and still get to learn those lessons from a win. So I think the listener here is right that there were a lot of defensive mistakes made. However, I would also point out that those defensive mistakes did not keep you from winning the game. Other things coming in here about Kingston. Kingston may stay 1 year, more than 1 year because of the coach. I just don't. I think there's too much money out there. He's a top 10 pick. He had more nights like tonight. He might be a top 5 pick. Like, that dude's good. Other listener questions in the chat here. How about Kingston's block? I thought this was a clean block live. They initially ruled it a goaltending. I think just because they were not clear on just how high Kingston was in the air. Now, Kingston's block is very surprising. I'm going to put up a picture here in a second. I'll make sure I get it downloaded in the appropriate manner. But Kingston's block here was just unworldly high off the ground. It's an interesting angle on this one, but you see his armpit is at the backboard at the peak of his jumper. This is on the way down after the block, and just unbelievable stuff. Other things about this game in terms of runs and things, I thought that it was interesting to see, frankly, how Houston defended a post hub defensively. We haven't seen them do that a whole lot. Toppin had a lot of success. Frankly, Toppin looked very good. He had 5 blocks. We should give kudos to the extent that is due. I thought Houston defended that, though, relatively well. Again, Toppin's averaging over 21 points per game with extremely high usage. On 38 minutes, he actually scored just 18. I'd say I think that's worth pointing out. I think they did a good job on that. Christian Anderson, I think, is the big one that has struggled in this one, and they probably did a better job of defending him. Anderson's averaging over 20 points per game himself. He had just 7 points, and I think he'll have some nightmares about Emanuel Sharp. Emanuel Sharp really physically was able to kind of control Christian Anderson so much so that they switched that matchup. It looked like by the end of the game on the Tech side, at least when they were trying to cover Emanuel. Houston was able to put Milos on him and bother him with length too. And ultimately, I think this was the kind of game Christian will probably respond to very well and will play very well when we have to go to Lubbock, right? Frankly, that they're playing that game again this month is freaking crazy. But that was, I think, an interesting one to see. I also think, for what it's worth, as far as watching things and how this game went back and forth and up and down, this game really did feel like a heavyweight fight in a lot of ways. Texas Tech led for more than half of the game, but neither team ever had. I guess Houston, for a brief second after that last free throw, had a 7-point lead. Neither team ever had, besides that brief second, more than a 6-point lead, a 2-possession lead, which speaks to how tremendous this back and forth was. Also think that the no bench points thing speaks to the gravity of the game. A lot of times, bench guys might play better at home or better against the opponents with less at stake or whatever. This clearly is kind of game where the starters are the starters are the starters, and they're the guys out here making plays, right? On that note, we should probably also send. We hope that Harwell is getting better. He took a pretty nasty hit, looked like a head-to-head, almost like a safety that catches a receiver going into him kind of head-to-head, but obviously basketball players don't wear helmets. No foul play, no dirty play or anything like that, but he took a head-to-head shot that looked pretty bad. He was pretty shaken up and needed help walking off the floor. Again, I said on Twitter, but I'll say it here too, if that's a mild concussion, I think that's the best possible option. We'll see kind of where that diagnosis. We'll probably hear more about it Maybe tomorrow we'll probably get an injury report ahead, about 24 hours ahead of the Baylor game over the weekend, and that'll be really when you find out the most about it. Now, other trends of this game, Houston was able to turn Tech over a lot. I also think Houston's pace of play turned Tech over a lot. 14 make sure I got that right. Yeah, 14 Texas Tech turnovers. Houston was unable to capitalize on most of them. Did eventually get that out to about 13 by the game's end. Houston's also very clean with basketball. Tech is not the typical Grant McCasland group. Tech only forced 6 turnovers in this one. So Houston able to take care of things on that. Houston eventually won the rebounding battle, but was behind the rebounding battle for much of this game. And that's, again, not very Houston either. Someone bringing up that Toppin did throw his knee into something again. I think that's still more impulsive. I don't like seeing guys getting tossed for basketball plays, but it did happen again. I texted Chris Level, Locked On Texas Tech, like, hey, man, what's going on over there? But anyway, all right, let's talk about some Nightcaps here in 1 second and kind of put a bow on this. God, what a freaking game! What a freaking game! I can't believe the one that, Kingston freaking Flemings. All right, let's talk about Nightcaps in 1 second. Before we get there, though, today's show is brought to you, as we mentioned, by our buddies over at Rue Giet, because we're going to talk about something people don't bring up. It's late at night. That stress from work, money, life. The Cougs, sometimes stress can just be there all the time, does not switch off at night. Absolutely need to be talking about how when it shows up in the worst possible times, Rue Giet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rue Giet Ready is the next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rue Giet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue and it absorbs fast. The science behind Rue Giet Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 formula for both mental and physical readiness. Board-certified doctors online, discreet packaging to your door. No one else has to know. It's something we should talk about, but you can be very private in doing it. So if you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. Rugiet, RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege. Get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rue Giet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Parker Ainsworth Locked On Coogs here, and I cannot, I had a whole separate show planned with about 3 minutes left in the basketball game when it just felt like Houston was not going to find the offense. And I'm still not sure they found the offense. They just found number 4 and said, hey, take the ball. Hey, that guy way up there in the air. Take the ball and go with it. Wild. The most obvious nightcap of all time in the history of the show has to go to Kingston Flemings. I mean, 23 points, game winners, multiple of those. He had 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and he had a turnover or 2 here. And it wasn't a flawless performance, but he turned it on to win the game. I want to give one though, 2 really. I thought Chris Cenac played his best non-scoring game of the season. He's had other games where he found the offense better. He had some struggles there, looked a little nervous at the free throw line there, but pulled down 11 rebounds, had a steal, played great defense on Toppin, played great defense on the perimeter, really impacted this game in a lot of ways. Besides, he had 11 points too. He had his double-double. But he had impacted the game in a lot of different ways. So I think Chris Cenac should get one. And then Chase McCarty. We mentioned only 1 bench player on either team scored. Chase, 0 points, had a couple rebounds, steal, a block. He felt like he was filling a very Ramon Walker feeling role. And early in this game, Ramon took a shot to the groin area and did not come back for a while. And that meant McCarty in his just about 10 minutes took all of that and did those jobs. And Houston will always need a guy to do those jobs. Chase McCarty doing that was, energy plays here, hyping up the bench after steals. Like it was an exciting few minutes with him in the game, filling that role to T. I feel like there's other guys I'm missing. Sharp had a great first half, did finish with 17 points. the offense just didn't go through him in the second half. I think, truthfully, he had a couple moments where he tried to like will it into it and then backed off and let the game flow. And I think that's a very, a strong maturity sign for what it's worth, but it didn't ultimately happen. Need to close on 3-point shooters in the chat here, so we'll make sure we do that. Yeah, again, not a perfect game. Good defensive game, not a perfect game. Tech is a very good 3-point shooting team, though I'd point out. They do that to a lot of people. They did that to Duke as well, and it didn't seem to. Anyway, it happens. A great win. Why does this team always manage to skate by with no decisive wins? Houston was a little disappointing. Thank God for Kingston. When you're divvying up shots and responsibilities, Milos won them the game over the weekend. I think at some point with 2-point cards, you might never truly get both of them and Sharp all clicking at once, just because there's only one basketball to go around. I think if all three guys are defending, and for the most part, I thought, frankly, Kingston had the worst defensive night of those three. If all three guys are defending, it's a relative term, I should point out. If all three guys are defending, I think it works. And if all three guys are able to take their turn when it is their turn, I think it works too. As far as no decisive wins, Sampson's got a viral quote from, maybe it was 2 years ago. Where he said, "Look, the only people that talk about ugly wins and pretty losses are the people not coaching." like if you're in that industry, if you're winning games, that's pretty. If you're not, that's ugly. It gets that simple, right? And I'm not trying to quantify or qualify everything, but man, I think it is impressive that you feel confident now between Auburn or Arkansas or Tech that, much like last year, if you keep the game close, you've got a guy or two that can make the play, right? Look, I understand how last season ended, the final whatever, right? But generally speaking, last year, Houston won a bunch of one score, one possession, close games as well. And they did that all the way to the national championship game. This year, you've already shown, frankly, again, at this point last year, you had more losses. You lost this game to Tech last year in Fertitta Center, right? You're 14-1. You're riding hot hands. You're figuring out who you are. And I think at some point, we'll probably talk about soon on this show. Transfer portal's got to calm down. We got so much talk about the transfer portal. That's going to be dominating most days. But Kingston's taking over this team. And look, I would love to have Kingston for 3.5 more years. It feels more like we're going to have him for about 3 more months. Let's enjoy that part before that guy is playing 82 games a year. Because, man, what a freaking night. Anyway, that's all I got tonight. Just what a freaking night. Kingston Fleming says Houston Cougar, and I could not be happier about it. I will probably break down more on the game now and later. We'll talk about more schematics of it. We got Baylor coming up this weekend. Again, like I said, transfer portal stuff's going on. So we'll get into all that this week as well as more chaos unfolds. We'll be here to talk about it, as always, at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe and help the show out, right? We say we're the most listened to Houston Cougar podcast, but we're trying to be more than that. Let's shoot up the Big 12 charts. Let's shoot up the Locked On charts. Let's really keep this thing growing. So hit subscribe and help us do that. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs. Kingston freaking Flemings, man.